Welcome to another week of Dan Really Likes Wine, and 4 bottles of wine I have been keeping but desperate to open, and this week I finally get the chance. In fact, I've planned my dinner later on this evening based around these very wines because they are very exciting collaborations and wines that speak of the excitement that is still rippling through the South African wine industry, whatever challenges from wine and economy we may be facing. And they come from 2 separate groups. 2 of the wines today are from Yardstick, which brings together a very talented winemaker and one of South Africa's finest chefs, and the other, the Tempus range, one of South Africa's most gifted winemakers, comes together with some guys who sell wine and flood my inbox with lots of offers for very expensive French wine that I would generally very much want but can't always afford. So this gives me the best of both worlds. We'll start though with the first of the 2 whites, which comes from a label called Yardstick. Everything about the look and feel of this appeals to me. The name Yardstick, is it the wine to measure every other wine against? Is it a wine they're measuring themselves against? Either way, it's a really cool name. I like it. It's bold and eye-catching as its minimalist design. Now, not only is the front very minimalist, but at the back, where normally the label would tell you that this wine is brilliant when done with Chinese 5-spiced ribs on a bed of mushroom risotto, pan-fried on some flambéed pork chops. This makes no such ridiculous food pairing suggestions. It simply tells you what it is. And what it is a Chardonnay made by Eben Sadie, a winemaker of no small renown, together with Peter Tempelhof. Peter Tempelhof has given me some of the finer meals I've eaten in South Africa over the last 15 to 20 years. These guys love wine, they're inspired by wine, and they've gone for their range with 2 very classic Burgundian examples, a Chardonnay now and a Pinot Noir that we'll taste in just a moment. But first of all, this very, very alluring Chardonnay. In not giving you too much information, the labelling is just so simple, so modest. It really is inviting you to make your judgment all on its own. But if you know who's behind the wine, you're probably going to make a bit of judgment already, because you know in Adam there's a terrific winemaker, and you know in Peter there is a particularly good chef. And it's Peter I'm really interested in because I know enough chefs. I look at people like David Higgs, like Pete Goffwood, like Ruben Riffel, like Benny Masakweng. These are guys who take their food extremely seriously, but they also take their wine very seriously as well, and they're not going to be involved in something that they aren't absolutely happy with. So the moment you have a whiff, it just bursts straight up your nose and gives you a really, really good aroma. And then onto the palate, and it's a lovely example of South African Chardonnay. And again, we're just taking it so nicely at the moment. It's got a nice strong fruit base to it. There's a bit of mineral to it. It's really round, it's really complete. And it's the kind of wine you suggest that Peter Tempelhof, chef extraordinaire, would, as he's making it, as he's tasting it, as the process is unfolding, is already thinking of some of the magic he can make in the kitchen. And that's probably the only thing I can imagine improving on this particular glass of Chardonnay is the Yardstick Chardonnay with a dish from Peter Tempelhof. Well, from one very exciting young South African winemaker to another, Eben Sadie, the unofficial king of the West Coast, the surfer who is a wine alchemist when he's not out on the waves, turning grapes into wine magic. This Shannon Blanc 2016 from vines that are 45 years old. So there's a real sense of history that goes into this. And there's also a really exciting partnership. The guys at Great Domains, I know a couple of them from a few years back from university days, and they bring a lot of really interesting wine into South Africa. A lot of it French, but also some Italian. This, though, is wine with a South African persuasion, because it's wine they've made in partnership with Eben. They've teamed up with him to make something very special, very unique. They do this every year. It's always something different. And this year, one of the 2 wines they've done is a Shannon Blanc. And when you look at the back, rather than looking at the information, and there is a little bit there, Tempus, the Latin word for time, explaining the collaboration, what's very important is that it has a number 555. and it is bottle 555 of just 712 that were made in total. So this is a particularly rare wine from a particularly fine winemaker in partnership with a particularly fine purveyor of wines. You gotta think this is going to be good. We're fairly early into 2018 and already there have been a number of articles, a number of features by eminent wine writers and authorities suggesting what's going to be big this year, and quite a few people have suggested that we could see the return of Sauvignon Blanc as a more de rigueur white wine for this year. I still think Shannon Blanc will lead the way. I still think it is South Africa's wine the way forward. People like Peter Tempelhof doing such wonderful things with Shannon Blanc, and then Eben Sadie. Ken Forrester has spawned a whole army of devotees across South Africa, but it's not just Ken who's servicing that love of Shannon Blanc. It's people like Eben Sadie, and together with the Great Domains team, some of the Shannon Blanc that is being produced is in those small batches, is made with such care. In this case, a 45-year-old set of vines. It's wine that really does pay tribute to not just the history of South African wine, but also the absolute commitment to make wine that reflects the very best of South Africa. Our Tempus name is probably the only thing that I would, if not criticise, then perhaps suggest going forward, and that would be, Dan, if you get another bottle, don't open it 2 years after it's been made, because this says to me that it's magnificent, but it is probably deserving of a little more time to grow into itself. It is already, though, an excellent, excellent wine. It's a lovely colour. It's got a nice deep flavour to it. Just a little sharpness at the end on the back of a really smooth feel. Eben having a lot of fun with a very specific project, a very focused project, and it's one half of what he's done with the team from Great Domains. But before we get to the second Sadie Great Domains collaboration, back to the guys at Yardstick and a 2014 Pinot Noir. Maybe not the greatest vintage in the history of South Africa, but grapes selected from, I think, 4 separate little pockets of cool climate, slightly higher vines, to bring together a Pinot Noir that, again, I would imagine will bring the best out of a terrific young winemaker and a chef with a great attention to detail. And if Chardonnay is an ideal platform for that collaboration with a white wine, then I think Pinot Noir should do the job very nicely with red. I'm coming off the back of a rather lengthy Pinot Noir free spell, and not by choice. I've just happened to be spending time abroad, and most of the wine I've been given or served or has been presented to me hasn't been Pinot Noir, with 1 or 2 minor exceptions. So I'm very happy to get back to some, and very happy to get back to some made by Adam with a little bit of help from Peter. That's one of the ironies of Pinot Noir, that although it is such a delicate, subtle grape, it's often used as the bedrock of those bigger red wine-infused French dishes, the subtle with the more robust. This is all subtlety as a wine. It's been done delightfully. I love that colour, I always do with a Pinot Noir, and it's as subtle and as perfectly engineered as you'd expect from a winemaking culinary combination as the 2 lads behind this. Terrific Pinot Noir, lovely label. It's really just finding its feet. I expect those feet have got a long and welcome road to walk. And to finish off, back to our collaboration, Eben Sadie and the team at Great Domains. When the guys spoke to me from Great Domains, they said, this is what we've made. They promised me they could get me a bottle of the white, which they did. 1 in 712 bottles, pretty good effort. They apologised profusely though, absolutely none of this left. And then a very excited phone call a couple of days later, we found one. And 712 bottles, not many for that. Here, only 497 of them made. And this for point of record, is bottle 389. And this is Grenache. And a lot of the Grenache we're finding around South Africa, and it's a grape that's also on the rise, is from fairly old vines, fairly established vines. But this is from a set of vines only 8 years old, so a lot younger than you might anticipate. It's a 2015 Grenache, and it is the red wine partnership between Eben Sadie and the guys from Great Domains. So, list of cool things about this particular wine. 1, it's made by Eben Sadie. That gives it a considerable cool factor already. 2, the labelling. I really like that. It's an understated piece of art. Plays with the theory of time that the Tempus name alludes to. A lot of fun. 3, it's Grenache. Grenache is the craft beer of wine at the moment. It's people in checked shirts and beards and woven sandals drinking it at the moment. It's a very cool wine to drink, and even cooler wine to be seen to be drinking. So you kind of got to tell people that you're drinking Grenache. But most of all, what I think is really cool about this is that it is a grape that in South Africa has really found a foothold once again. We lost touch a little bit with Grenache, but it's certainly back with a bang. And in the hands of somebody like Eben, it's only going to be good for South African wine. And then there's one final cool factor, and this one explains why it's a wine that is Grenache and yet is maybe missing just that very tiny little something. And that very tiny little something is that hint, that innuendo of wood that you might expect to pick up. And the reason for it: this isn't aged in barrels, it's not even aged in tanks. This is properly old school. This is done in clay pots. And I've seen this happen in a couple of winemaking spots around the world. It's not really done anywhere much other than for the cool factor and to have a bit of fun and to do something different. But throwing back to wine's older traditions, Eben has made this in clay pots, and the result is a wine that's a little fruitier, lacks that little hint of oak or similar, and as a result just gives a slightly different character to that Grenache. And it's a character I think will probably change just a little more as well after a bit of time. You leave one of Eben's bottles out and they're slightly chameleon-like. They do tend to change a touch with time. But already it's a very distinctive wine. It's a collaboration that I think both sides will be very happy with. It's produced a Grenache that's terrific, just a little different, and that's very similar to the philosophy behind the guys at Great Domains. They bring out lots of wine that's terrific, but often a little different to what we get here a lot of the time in South Africa. So a lovely collection and a great example of partnerships. And at a time in South Africa when we're uncertain about our rain, the economy is still trying to get back on its toes, and where wine is looking for a sense of identity in South Africa, finding people who come together to make wine together and to share their expertise and their love of wine is a big part of taking the industry forward in South Africa. The only other part that's left is people on the other end of the food chain to be happily drinking it, and I'm proud to play my part. Cheers.